If they can get one of them to testify against the other one, they can put that person in jail for 25 years. That's the deal. Otherwise, both of them go to jail for 5 years. If they can get somebody to testify against the other one, then the person that testifies will only get 1 year, or they'll get probation. So the deal is 0 or 25 years or 5 and 5. That's the question. So the other question is, will they testify against each other? That's the big question. Now this has come up before. I had a student that went to jail for 5 years because she wouldn't. She was caught with a lot of drugs, and she wouldn't tell the state where she got the drugs or who gave her the drugs. And because of that, she went to jail for 5 years. If she had turned in the guy that gave her the drugs, her distributor, then she would have gotten probation. She didn't. She was very proud of herself that she went to jail for 5 years for this guy. And of course, by the time, after about 2 years, somebody else dropped the dime on this guy, and he went to jail for 25 years. All right. So, anyway, so she was real proud of herself that she didn't rat on this guy. She said, "There's nothing worse than a rat." Anyway, so the question is, would the guy blink first, or would the lady blink first? Which one of them would take the probation and send the other one up for 25 years? That's the question. And this is known as the prisoner's dilemma. Prosecutors will use this all the time. Actually, that's what Mueller's doing. He's finding people that broke the law, and he's telling them, look, we'll not send you to prison. We'll give you probation if you testify against other people in the Trump administration. That's exactly what's going on right now.
Oh.
I know, it's exciting, isn't it?
I know that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a bunch of junk going on. The Prisoner's Dilemma was originally developed by Flood and Drescher at the RAND Corporation in Santa Monica, California. The RAND Corporation, R-A-N-D, stands for Research and Development. It used to be an Air Force. Organization. They were doing research, trying to determine what to do with nuclear weapons. The biggest question was, how in the world do we face down the Russians? The Russians had nuclear weapons. We had nuclear weapons. The question was, could we trust the Russians? That was the biggest question. And the answer was, well, no, hell, of course we can't trust the Russians. We got the Russians sticking their thumbs in our election, in the last election cycle. So they developed this game in the 1950s. It was revised in 1992, and the revised game looked like this. Instead of the Prisoner's Dilemma, they call it the Wall Street game. 2 players can pick either option X or Y. If they both pick X, both of them win $3. If they both pick Y, they both lose $1. If they picked X and the other person picks Y, then you lose $6 and he wins $6. If you pick Y and he picks X, you win $6 and he loses $6. Okay. So what's the best way to do this game, to play this game? Donald Trump is a negotiator. So what would he do? What would he do as the best negotiator in the world?
He just throw you under the bus.
I'm sorry?
He'd throw you under the bus.
And so how would he throw you under the bus?
Give you the lesser option, or...
Sure, but which one? So what would he pick every time?
To win $6 and you lose out on 6.
Yeah.
Sure, of course he would. But how can he do that? How do you do that? How do you win $6 and the other guy lose $6?
You give up the other person?
Yeah, but how would you do that? I mean, you've got X and Y. You got to pick between X and Y. If you pick X, and they pick X, then you both win $3. If you pick Y and they pick Y, you lose $1. If you pick Y and they pick X, you win $6. So as an ace negotiator, what would you do?
Pick one.
Pick Y every time. Every time. You can lose $1 every time as long as you win $6 at least once. Now you're ahead. So if you pick Y the first time and he picks X the first time, he's down $6 and you're up $6. So what if he picks Y every time? Well, it's okay because you can do this 4 times or 5 times, and you'll still be up $1, and he'll be down $10. So who wins? You do. All you have to do is pick Y every time, and all he has to do is pick X one time, and then you stop the negotiations as long as you win some money. Now, what's the probability he's going to continue to pick Y? Well, that's the whole point of the scenario. Okay, so this is, if we're talking about dollars, it's not that big a deal. But what if we're talking about nuclear weapons? I know. Now we got a problem. How much death and destruction is acceptable? So who drops the bomb first? If you drop the bomb first, then you win. You're more likely to win. You're more likely to destroy his weapons. And that's one of the reasons why, if you know anything about the Cold War, we had missile silos up in Montana. Montana has 1 million people in it, and it's the 4th largest state in the United States. They're out in the middle of nowhere. So if they destroyed our missile silos in Montana, they wouldn't kill any people. So they would have to waste, the whole point was that they would have to waste all of these nuclear weapons destroying our nuclear weapons. That was the idea. That's why Wyoming and Montana and North Dakota are just full of these missile silos, as odd as that sounds. So this is an interesting game. They played this game theory over and over and over again, and they play it to the end. And the end, of course, was who would win the nuclear war. In the Wall Street game, people are more likely to adopt a cooperative strategy, especially if you know the guy, and especially if you like the guy. Playing with a friend, of course, made it more likely that both of you would pick X. Expecting to interact with your partner in the future, of course, would make you pick X. Changing the name of the game to the community game increased the percentage of people who cooperated from 33% to 71%. So initially when they played the game, if you played it with a stranger, you were cooperative only 33% of the time. But if you played it with somebody that you knew, you were cooperative 71% of the time. Now what does that tell you about nuclear negotiations? If we're more likely to cooperate with a friend than we are with an enemy or with somebody that we don't know, what does that tell you about nuclear negotiation?
More open, more options.
Yeah, the more you interact with that group of individuals, the more likely that you're going to they are going to pick this a more positive outcome. Really kind of fascinating too, because when we started looking at the Russians, and we can still look at view the Russians and try to determine what they're going to do. But when we looked at the Russians, what we realized was these people don't even like their friends. And that's what's happening now. The nicer we have been to the Russians, the more they've tried to mess with stuff in the United States. Yeah, but it gets really interesting as far as the Russians are concerned. Tit for tat strategy is a means of encouraging cooperation by at first acting cooperatively, but then always responding the way your opponent did cooperatively or competitively on the previous trial. So if he starts using Y or saying Y, then you start saying Y. If he says X, you say X. So that's the tit for tat strategy. And that's pretty much the way that we did things. And that's actually what was going on. Of course, I was in the military in '71. We were fighting the war in Vietnam at the time. But we were also trying to face the Russians down. Here we were, half of our military was in Vietnam. But if you talk to a lot of people, their parents, or if they were in the military during Vietnam, they weren't in Vietnam, they were in Germany. Why in the world would we send so many people into Germany? Well, we were fighting the war in Vietnam, but we were also needing to face down the Russians. Where did we face down the Russians? We faced them down in Germany, in East Germany, in East Berlin. We were facing the Germans down at that point. We had 500,000 troops. We had more troops in Germany than we had in Vietnam. Throughout the entire Cold War. So we had lots of people going to Germany. We had better, our best military people were in Germany. They weren't in Vietnam. As odd as that may seem. That's one of the reasons why we were drafting so many people. Where were we sending the draftees? Did we send them to Germany? Hell no, we sent them to Vietnam. Now, these are individuals that were relatively expendable. They were fighting an enemy that wasn't really that sophisticated. But in Germany, we would have been facing down the Russians. The analogy to the arms race would be to match not only any military buildup made by an unfriendly nation, but also any conciliatory gesture such as a ban on nuclear testing. And that's actually what happened during Vietnam. The Russians started building up and they started massing troops in Germany. It looked like they were going to invade Germany. So instead of sending all of our troops into Vietnam, we sent most of our best troops into Germany. So if you know anything about, if you look at the troops that we sent to Germany, these were our best guys. So if you know somebody that instead of going to Vietnam went to Germany, that probably meant that he was in a really highbrow unit. There were 6 SEAL teams, and we sent 2 SEAL teams to Vietnam, and we sent 4 to Germany. Well, the European theater anyway. As interesting as that is. We had special forces, Army Special Forces in Vietnam, certainly, but we had more special forces in Germany at the time. As a matter of fact, that's where we would rotate people out of Vietnam and we would send them back to Germany, especially the specialized troops. If we sent them to Vietnam at all, then we rotated them through Germany. So there's a lot of people that served in Germany during the Vietnam War in the 60s and the 70s, as odd as it may seem. Okay. So we're fighting a war here. In the 1960s, game theory was still predicting reactions to the Cold War. Deutsch and Krauss in 60 and then 62 demonstrated that threats were not an effective means of reducing conflict. So, of course, and of course, we have stopped threatening the enemy. We've stopped saying that we're going to blow you up, we're going to blow you up 15 or 20 times. We don't do that anymore. We haven't done that since the 50s. In the 50s, of course, we had more nuclear weapons than they did. So all we did was we would stack up our weapons and we'd say, look how many we have. We know how many you have. So look what's going to happen next. One of the things that happened here on this reservation was that you had uranium mines. And of course, those uranium mines were working 24-hour shifts. They were digging new mines all the time. There are hundreds of them all over the reservation. One of the reasons that you guys were able to occupy this area was because there was nothing here. Nobody wanted it. If you think about it, I mean, what is there here? Can you grow a lot of crops here? Can you grow a lot of wheat and corn? Hell, you can. You got. There's no water.
You can along the river. And there was irrigation a long time ago.
Yeah,
there were orchards if you didn't really know the area well. This was once a big orchard. There were places in the valleys and different places that had.
There were selected places, little
Yeah.
spots around the reservation, like oases around this massive desert.
Who's that orchid?
I know.
My husband, he works with Land Grant and, Nappy, they grow potatoes and everything, but, this year, we're gonna start introducing potato crops to different, producers, and we're gonna
Potatoes take a
sell
lot of
it.
water.
We're gonna sell it to Frito-Lay because you think there's no water, we've, fixed the irrigation pipe all the way to the beginning part, and it irrigates all over the place. So, like right now, there's water flowing through the creek, but like towards July, the water won't be going down towards Chinle, but
Is there any water in the
water-
Chinle Creek?
Huh?
Is there any water in Chinle Creek right now?
Yeah, there's some, there's a little.
I don't
But
think so either.
see,
I've never seen any
Arizona-
water in that creek.
Arizona has the biggest aquifer, that you could ever find. Yes.
The Oglala Aquifer is the largest aquifer in the world.
Okay, well, my husband's lying to me. No, I was kidding. But we do a lot of crops. We have a lot of producers out here that are growing alfalfa, wheat, winter crops, corn. We're gonna start the potatoes, and one year I planted wild strawberries, and so we do get a lot, and it is hard because we're
Yeah.
dry land farmers.
Sure, it's dry land farming.
But it's to the point now because the chapter house here put in a grant for I think over $4 million, and they got it. So they fixed all the irrigation pipes, so all the farmers here, because this is all farmland.
That's why they call it wheat field.
Yeah, and so they're trying to get everybody to start planting, or else they're gonna lose their,
Oh, sure.
yeah.
It's like trying to farm in Montana.
Yeah,
That's tough.
I mean, farming in Montana, you only get 3 months.
Exactly.
3 months, so what can you plant besides alfalfa?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you can plant, what is that wheat? Red something wheat. You can't really make bread out of it. It's too tough.
And then,
Yeah,
we
there's.
do a lot of greenhouses around here now.
What I'm telling you is that if this were good farmland, they would have taken it away from you, just like they did everybody else, just like the people in Kansas. I mean, there were tribes all over Nebraska and Kansas and Iowa.
I just seen a commercial before I came here that said, people think fracking is bad, and this is New Mexico. We're gonna stick to fracking. It helps preserve the water and something else, and then it says natural oil and gas, and I was like, oh my God.
It
How could
destroys.
they even let this on the air?
It destroys the water.
It does.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. It opens up. I mean, right now you've got pockets of water and pockets of oil and methane, and if you frack, of course, you're sending water down into that to break that up, to open that up so that you can get the oil and the water and the methane out. But the water that you use becomes contaminated with oil and methane, so it contaminates your water supply. That's what fracking does. Okay, my point is, if this had been a good, if there was anything here that they wanted, they would have taken it. That's the way white people do things. That's the way they did back in the 1880s.
And they took the coal.
Yeah, the coal. They did that with the coal. I was talking to somebody last night about it. They'll just take it, just like they did the gold mine up in Montana, on the Fort Belknap reservation. There was one mountain that had gold in it. They had found it. So what did they do? They told the tribe, well, we've cut out this chunk of land for you, and but we're going to take this bite out of it because there's gold here. And they did. They said, we won't feed you. We won't give you your commodities unless you give us this gold, the gold mine. And there's, if you look at the Fort Belknap, what Fort Belknap looks like, it looks like somebody took a bite out of the right-hand corner, down in the corner, because there was gold in that. And then there are hill.
Is
And
that the Snake Mountain, or Snake Mountain?
no, it was Spirit Mountain. Anyway, so it's got gold, and not only that, but the gold, it was not that easy to get to, so they had to use cyanide leaching to get to the gold, to melt all the other stuff. So they infused, they put cyanide in water, and they soaked out the gold. And so what happened with the rest of that cyanide in water? Well, it, of course, leaked down into the water supply on the reservation. As Ugly said, is why are we talking about this? Oh, we're talking about them wanting your land. Well, and so so how much did they pay you for all this uranium? My goodness, this is the second largest uranium deposit that we found in the world. So how much did the Navajo? You guys should have all the money in the world.
But we don't.
You don't, because they confiscated it. The largest uranium deposits up in Canada, and we own those deposits up in Canada. Well, we don't anymore. We sold it to the Russians.
Idiots.
I think the Navajo Nation is the richest tribe in the world.
It probably is, but it still doesn't have very much money. No, it's not. It's not the richest.
A lot of money.
It's-
I mean, from the Eloise Cabal, I keep bringing that up, from the Eloise Cabal settlement.
Uh-huh.
They did one chapter house meeting, where'd the money go?
Exactly.
Where'd the money go? I mean, they said, we'll fix the roads, and then after that, all you hear is scandals in the paper.
Scandals, exactly.
That
Oh.
money is put in a trust. It's over something billion now, according to the last, we were talking about last
Right.
semester. And they were saying that trust that Peterson's all put up, nobody's allowed to touch it, so it's continuously, collecting interest.
Right.
So no
Money
one's
always
allowed
makes
to touch
money.
it. Yeah. No one's allowed to touch it, and that's where some of that money from the Cobell lawsuit went. And then most of it goes to scholarships, and then there's more money coming in from casinos, which is great.
Casinos, whatever's coming in
Yeah.
from the casino. I know. Who's running your casino? Are you guys running your own casino?
I don't think so.
I think it's a Chickasaw running your casino.
We don't know.
Okay.
They don't
I
tell us
heard
that.
it was the Apache that are running the Navajo Casino.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of weird. Do they have their own? No, they don't. They don't even have their own casino. But the Chickasaws, they own casinos all over Indian country.
Oh, really?
They're the ones that own the, well, who owns your casino?
We own that casino.
Do you?
We
Are
bought
you
it, it's finally ours as of last year. We
Okay.
bought it outright from SIA Corporation. And I'm understanding right now that SIA Corporation did not have the jurisdiction to even be a corporation on our reservation, but because of our tribal councilmen, they let them in, and then they were the ones that got the casino going. But we finally paid it off and everything, and right now SIA Corporation, they own like half of the businesses in Browning, and they're not even black, they're white men.
Are they?
Yeah.
Or are they from Oklahoma? See, you guys think that,
I think they're Cree.
that's a Montana
Like,
joke.
I don't know.
They're not Cherokee, yeah, okay. Why am I talking about this? I
I
can't
don't
remember.
know.
Oh, we're talking about conflict and condemning. Oh, so the Russians own the uranium mine up in Canada, yeah, but they can't send any of the uranium anyplace except here. Yeah, none of it can leave North America. So that's the deal. They get the money for it, but we get the uranium. So it's not like we sold them all this uranium. All we did was we sold them the mine. We got the whatever billion, well, whoever owned it gets the billions and billions of dollars. The Canadians don't even have any, they don't have an interest in this whole thing. So here's this chunk of Canadian land, it's owned by the United States, and now it's sold to a Russian company. And we get all the uranium, like they're building their own nuclear weapons in Canada.
I have a question. Would this kind of be classified as in the game theory, as in business psychology?
Yeah, business psychology uses this all the time. It was developed by the military to figure out whether we could confront the Russians. What would happen next if we did this? What would the Russians do, or what would the Soviets do? Of course. So not only did we come up with the prisoner's dilemma and the Wall Street game and the community game, but we also came up with this interesting trucking game. The trucking game actually is more demonstrative of a nuclear confrontation. It's a conflictual game. The results of the study showed that when there was an equal reaction to a threat, the threatened side would retaliate against threats in kind, making it a no-win situation. And this is one of the reasons why we did what we did during the Cold War. We knew that if we threatened them, then they would threaten us, and now we're at the brink of nuclear war. And this is one of the reasons why they had that clock, and the clock said, I don't know, midnight is total world destruction, and we're at 11:59. Why? Because they still have nuclear weapons. We still have nuclear weapons. Neither of us are backing down. We're confronting one another. And of course, the only way to win this game is through cooperation. But how in the world do we get the Russians to cooperate with us? That is the question. This is what the game looks like. In the trucking game, players earn money by driving from one point to another as quickly as possible. There were two different ways to get there. You could go the straight route, which is the easiest route, but this is a one-way road. You can go the long route, but that takes a lot more money. And so both sides have a long route that they can take. So the best way to do it is to go the one-lane highway. That's the best way to do it. However, both companies can't be on the road at the same time. So how in the world do you decide who gets to drive on this road? You also have the ability to set up a gate so that you can block them from getting through this road. So this is very similar to what was going on in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, until the Soviet Union collapsed. Very, very similar to what was going on. They had lots of nuclear weapons. We had lots of nuclear weapons. We had them hidden. The idea was that these were secret, and since they were secret, nobody could target them. That was the idea. That's why there are so many missile silos in Montana, because Montana has no people, and we weren't going to lose anybody. And besides, who are we going to lose? We're just going to lose, Montanans, and who gives a shit about Montanans?
Is that how it is in Fort Belknap? My friend was saying that there's so many truckers going in. I'm not sure if she was saying Fort Belknap or Wolf Point, but there's so many truckers going in and going out. It's just non-stop, 24 hours a day, and it's getting to the point where they're starting to lose a lot of tribal members, through all of this money, and it's creating a lot of drug use, accidents, and it's not even, it's just really bad.
The Bakken oil fields. The Bakken oil fields are in eastern Montana and in western North Dakota. They go into the Fort Peck Reservation. And the problem is that 2, which is the major highway, goes all the way across Montana, is only a 2-lane highway. And of course, the more heavy trucks drive on that highway, the more it breaks down the highway. Yeah. So what they're doing is they're hiring people from the area as local truckers, and of course they're sending them into, they're taking them into Wolf Point and into whatever that little town is in North Dakota. But they're pulling a lot of people off the reservation to drive trucks, to be oil field workers. Yeah, so a lot of people are leaving the reservations. Fort Belknap, Fort Peck. Not so much the Cheyenne reservation, which is the way it always works. But the Crow reservation's losing a lot of people too. Well, you don't care about the Crows. You don't care about those guys. Okay, so the idea is, how in the world how can both companies make money? That's the question. The best way to do it is to use the short route. You lose money going the long route, but you have a gate. You can keep them from going. Even if you can't go, they can't go, and so they're going to lose money. Sounds like the nuclear arms race, doesn't it? In the initial Deutsch and Krauss trucking game, the two sides could not communicate with each other. They ran another version of the study where participants were required to communicate. And we're talking about Russians and we're talking about Americans here. The results, there were reduced losses somewhat in the unilateral threat condition, but it failed to increase cooperation in the other two conditions. Communication in the trucking study did not foster trust between the two groups, despite the fact, and of course that's what's been going on with the Americans and the Russians. We still don't trust the Russians, or at least we didn't trust the Russians. We didn't trust the Soviets. And then of course the wall came down, Soviet Union collapsed, and now it's Russia. Do we trust the Russians? And well, sure we do. Well, evidently we do, because Trump won't say anything negative about the Russians. This is really kind of weird.
And all kinds of stuff is coming out about the Russians, you know, it's just kind of weird. But then if you look at the Obama administration with that John Kerry,
John Kerry was Secretary of State.
Yeah, his daughter is married to one of the high-class Iranian or Iraqi in Afghanistan. One of them, he's like a prince or something. So he sent somebody, this is Fox News. But anyway, he sent...
Well, let's take this for the gospel.
Yeah. But anyway, his daughter was married to a really high guy over there, you know, so that's why a lot of stuff didn't get taken or done over there, and he was Secretary of
State.
Yeah, Secretary of State in here. So that's a big controversy through Fox News right now. But this morning I was listening, I was half asleep, but I was listening, and MSN, NBC, ABC, CBS, or whatever.
CBS, yeah.
They're all fake news compared to Fox. That's what Trump was saying.
I know.
And my psychology kicked in, and I was like, oh.
Travis is over here going, yeah, that's right, fake news.
Did you hear that?
It's new. Everything on the Sinclair network. Sinclair owns like 200 television stations. And that's their new promo, is that all other news is fake news and only Fox and Sinclair are real news. That's the new spiel. I know. Isn't this fun?
And then the culture of our president, you know, he actually did a new culture. You know, we've never had a president who Facebooked or who tweeted or anything like that. But he is not going to step down from Twitter. So he's got his own culture of a president, you know.
He may have shot himself in the foot, because he attacked Amazon. Amazon lost $39 billion. In a week. $39 billion, that's a lot of money.
For no taxing?
Well, a lot of the things he's been saying are just not true. But you have to read the fake news in order to figure that out. Yeah, a lot of what he says isn't true. But he's actually destroying that company, and that's not. They can sue him, and it should be interesting to see. He may have shot himself in the foot. You know, he may get away with this collusion stuff with the Russians, but this is business. You can't do that. you can't just attack somebody like that, especially in his position. We'll see what happens. I keep saying that, we're going to see what happens. But we really will see what happens in this case. The problem with the communication in the trucking study is that it did not foster trust. So communication didn't work. And of course, this is what we were trying to negotiate with the Russians for an extended length of time. It just didn't, and we got nothing out of it. In fact, people use the intercom to threaten each other, and that's what we were doing. We were using the red phone, they were the famous red phone, which isn't actually red, and it's not actually a phone, to communicate with the Russians, and all we were doing was threatening them. And of course, that's what's happening now with, well, Donald Trump hasn't attacked them at all. Negotiation is a form of communication between opposing sides in a conflict in which offers and counteroffers are made, and a solution occurs only when both parties agree. So you have to get both parties to agree. But both parties aren't going to agree unless each party gets something out of it. That's the whole point. An integrated solution is a solution to a conflict whereby parties make trade-offs on issues according to their different interests. Each side concedes the most on issues that are unimportant to it, but important to the other side. So if something is important to you, then you are less likely to concede, but if the other side doesn't care, then of course they will allow it to go through. People often find it difficult to identify integrative solutions. People will tend to distrust proposals made by the other side and to overlook interests that they have in common. And this, of course, is what happened over the last summer. My daughter and the father of her child were negotiating them leaving Florida. My daughter wanted to leave Florida. She had a better paying job in Iowa, but she wanted to move her son up to Iowa. The problem was, of course, that the father wanted them to stay in Florida so he could see the son more frequently. So they had to negotiate. And of course, as long as there was no negotiator, the two of them just sniped at one another. And of course, then they got the courts involved. As soon as they got the courts involved, of course, they sent in a negotiator. The negotiator was able to get them to negotiate in just a couple days. So they signed an agreement, and now my grandson just came back from spring break. He spent spring break in Florida with his father, and of course now he lives in Iowa and loves Iowa. He loves the cold, as it turns out. He loves the cold. His mother tried to turn him into a beach baby, but it didn't work. When negotiating, integrative solutions are often available. Work on gaining trust and communicating. Remember, people often construe situations differently. Neutral mediators often help solve labor disputes, legal battles, and divorce proceedings by recognizing that there are mutually agreeable solutions to a conflict. And of course, he wanted to win. So he hired the most expensive lawyer that he could find. Well, his parents hired the most expensive lawyer that he could find, thinking, of course, that that would give him an advantage because the negotiator, of course, would knuckle under to this high-pressure lawyer. And as it turned out, of course, the very opposite happened, and he lost. My daughter is in Iowa now, and she's no longer in Florida, much to her chagrin, because she really is a beach bunny. My son isn't a beach baby, but she is a beach bunny. Okay, we're going to talk about attraction and intimacy. This is a chapter in social psychology. This is the part that most people take social psychology just for this very chapter, trying to figure out why the hell didn't my relationship work out? What's wrong with men? What's wrong with women? You know, the whole thing.
How interesting.
If you look on the internet, probably 60% of all the internet deals with attraction and intimacy. It doesn't have anything to do with news. Even if you go to the CNN website or the MSNBC website, over to the side, it's just a bunch of junk about celebrities. And who gives a holy flip about celebrities? And the answer is we all do. As it turns out, we all do. We're all worried about Brad and Angelina or whatever, Angelina Jolie. Or are we worried about it? Who do we worry about now? Is Kim Kardashian and what's his name? West.
Kanye.
Kanye West, I knew it was somebody. Yeah. Well, where in the world, why do we even care about the Kardashians? And not just one of them, all of them. Right? I mean, the whole thing about Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn, isn't he Caitlyn?
Yeah.
Okay, the whole deal, I mean, who would have cared that he was transgender, except he was on television like every week? And then there's the youngest daughter. What's going to happen with the youngest daughter? Is she a lesbian? I don't know. She made a Pepsi commercial that just got blasted.
That's probably business psychology.
Right, exactly. That's why psychology is so important, so we can figure out the Kardashians. Because humans tend to be fairly defenseless alone, we have evolved as gregarious beings. Since we are gregarious, and this classroom doesn't feel so strange. I mean, people are sitting away from one another, but that's okay. At least we're together, and we don't feel threatened. We don't feel we feel like we can interact. But that's because we're gregarious. We live in groups. People very rarely live alone. And if they do live alone, then we assume that there's something wrong with them. So we live in apartment buildings. I live alone. Well, I don't actually live alone. I live with my wife. But my brother lives alone on a 20-acre farm in Indiana. And there's nobody, people come to visit him from time to time, but not very often. Is there something wrong with my brother? Is it okay to live alone?
He just looks quiet.
He's got a dog. Due to this need, relationships have become the core of human existence. When people lack a need for relationships, they are diagnosed with odd personality disorders, paranoid personality disorder, schizoid personality disorder, and schizotypal personality disorder. So if somebody wants to be alone, I want to be alone. If somebody really wants to be alone, we assume there's something wrong with them. Because most people want to be with each other. I know.
It's really weird. Well, it's not really weird. I find in this culture, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I find in the Navajo culture that a lot of the men are really attached to the mothers.
Right.
So if you're gonna marry a man, you're gonna marry the mother too.
That sounds painful.
I got blessed. My mother-in-law is totally awesome, she's
Right.
just like really awesome. But I find it that way, but with my boys, I'm like, no, I'm not like that. I cut your apron string and...
Right. That umbilical cord got cut when you were born, dude. Different cultures. Yeah.
The men actually, they live, they're told you have to go move to your in-laws.
Yeah.
You no longer exist here. You're just a sperm donor, and you're gonna be forgotten after a while. So go enjoy your life.
But with my culture, the woman goes to the man, so it's just like really a backlash.
Right,
like back and forth kind of thing, And so when I got married, my family said, okay, you belong to the Navajo now.
Right.
And that's where you stay. My dad gave me away to the Navajo, and that's that,
They let you visit from time to time, but they don't treat you like you belong there.
They don't. When I go home, my uncles are like, you're not even a part of us anymore.
Do you get to vote in the elections?
Kinda. Well, they've
That's
been
important.
sending me stuff to vote, yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, okay, but you don't know.
Women are kind of superstitious now. If they move back to their in-laws, they make sure they have a double wide trailer. If anything is to happen, they can take that double wide trailer and
Load
drive
it
it
up
off.
and take off. Oh, I
I
love
was
it.
told, when I got married, my husband moved with me to my parents' area, and my mom told us, growing up, men, when they agree to marry you, they come with all of their things, but when they decide to leave you, they just leave with the clothes on their back. They don't get anything. They just go.
That's weird.
That's so
Yeah.
true.
That's the way my second wife was. Every time she married a guy, she would build up a household, and then when she left, she'd just leave with the clothes on her back.
I feel like doing.
And all she did was complain about the fact that she gave up the best washer and dryer that she's ever had. And I know, it was so weird. When she left me, she just took off. She just left with her clothes.
You know, in our, what do you call it, in our tribe, our chief, he wrote the Constitution, the Blackfeet Constitution, and it says if a woman and a man divorce in the Blackfeet culture, the man gets everything.
Oh my goodness.
Everything. The woman has to leave with nothing on her back. I mean, well, just with what she has on her back. And it's true. So when my mom and dad divorced, my dad got everything, even us. He got the kids,
Got
everything.
the kids too.
And my mom had to start over.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy.
That must have been tough.
It was. I think it was tough, and you know, cause my mom's Mexican
Right.
and everything, so it was really tough.
Wow.
And then again, our tribe is matriarchal. You know,
Mhm.
the women gets everything, and the kids
Right.
carry on their mom's clan first.
Right.
So we are who our mom is.
There you go.
Yeah. So there you go.
And it's kind of interesting in the white culture, the name follows the father, and usually that's it. The mother's name isn't even mentioned. But then, of course, you guys talk about your clans and whatnot. But normally, once a woman gets married, she doesn't belong to her birth family anymore. She belongs to her married family. So, which is kind of curious in most white cultures.
Wow.
I don't know. But then again, there's a lot of different, we're talking about Germans, we're talking about English, we're talking about, Swedish, we're talking about a lot of different groups, so some of them are different than others. Since humans, all other animals must reproduce to survive, attraction between males and females has had to have taken place, or none of us, of course, would be here. So pretending that sex doesn't exist is ludicrous. It just it has to exist. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Humans have an intense need to belong. We need to belong, and that's one of the reasons why, if you don't belong to anything, we assume that you have a mental illness. We all have to belong to something. I identify myself as a Hoosier. I identify myself as white. I identify myself as a runner. I identify myself in various ways. A lot of people belong to things like churches. They're Presbyterians or Methodists or Catholics or whatever. But this is a need to belong. It's a need to be with other individuals. And the reality may be that we can go back to anthropologic times, and the reason that we need to belong is because if we didn't belong to a group, then we wouldn't survive. We wouldn't have survived. So belonging is extremely important. The need to connect with others is enduring, is an enduring close relationship, and we're not just talking about romantic relationships, we're also talking about friendships. Somebody protects you. I have friends here, and sometimes when I do something stupid or say something idiotic, they protect me. These are my friends. These are the people that protect me, and I protect them the best way that I possibly can. That's friendship. Roy Baumeister and Mark Leary feel that the following aspects illustrate the power of social attractions. When a man and a woman have a child, the child's survival chances are boosted by a nurturing of bonded parents. In other words, if the two parents are bonded together, then the child is more likely to survive. Social attachments enhance survival for both children and their caregivers. When separated, they seek to be reunited. So if a child is separated from one of his parents, they seek to be reunited. Children that have been abandoned as babies, they have this need, this feeling that they need to go back and connect themselves with that missing parent. My children, my son was 9 months old when my first wife left. After he graduated from high school, after he turned 18, he went down to Texas and visited her. She had seen him maybe 5 times. from the time he was 9 months old until he was 18 years old. And he went down to visit her. Why? He felt like he needed to reconnect with her. He was mad at me because we weren't together anymore. And after he came back, he wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't angry at me. He wasn't angry at her. And of course, this is this whole abandonment thing. But he felt like he needed to reunite with her. And once he did that, then he could live the rest of his life. He's had abandonment issues all of his life because he missed her. He missed having a mother. He missed having a second parent. And even though I got remarried twice, he still had that need to reunite with his biological parent. People so strongly desire close relationships that they spend billions of dollars to attract the opposite sex. We're looking for the perfect relationship. We're seeking the perfect relationship. How do we know what the perfect relationship is? Who tells us what that looks like? How do we learn this? Do we watch The Bachelor?
I don't know, but on the social attachment one, if a daughter or a female doesn't know her father, is that where like daddy issues come in?
Daddy issues come in, and she's more likely to seek her father in her relationships. In other words, as soon as she's old enough to become romantic, she does become romantic.
Because my daughter, when she turned 2 days before she turned 18, my husband raised her from the time she was a little girl, and 2 days before she turned 18, she took off to Utah or to Wyoming and met her real dad, and
Right.
so I keep telling her, let it go, let it go.
Yeah.
But I do see a
You
lot
can't
of that.
convince them. I mean, they have this feeling, this need.
How
to
do
connect.
you treat that?
It's not anything that you can treat. There's no reason that you should treat it. Did she move to Wyoming to be with her biological father?
No, she just went to meet him.
To meet him, exactly.
Yeah.
She wanted to see who she was, or who her children might potentially be in the future. That's what she was looking for. That's why my son went down to Texas. And he's chosen not to have any children. So it may have something to do with his mother, with his biological mother. Because half of his genes are her genes. Right. Only half of his genes are Bradway genes. He likes the Bradway half. He's not real crazy about the other half. So that's what your daughter was doing. She wanted to see who he was. To see what her future looked like. Okay, so people change themselves. They spend billions and billions of dollars. Britney Spears. This is what she looked like when she was on the Mickey Mouse Club. And of course, this is what she looks like now. That person and this person, you couldn't even tell them that they were the same person. Angelina Jolie just had her nose fixed. Not that big a deal. But she had her lips plumped up.
No, her lips are naturally big. Like
They
her
are
mom's.
naturally big, but
Yeah.
look how big they are now. They're bigger.
And she has fillers right here.
Oh, she
And
did.
Botox.
Yeah, filler. Cool.
How can you tell?
Right here, when women get older, the fat right here disappears. And then you can see it right here too. You begin to get these like bumps right here. She has fillers right here. And then crow's feet, obviously she would have maybe 11s or a line between her eyebrows. There's Botox there.
Yeah, she looks almost older in that picture than she does in this picture.
Yeah.
Oh, let's check out some guys that did the same thing. Tom Cruise had his nose fixed. He had his teeth certainly fixed. He had his eyebrows shaped to some extent. Michael Jackson, of course, used to be black, or was black, and then he decided, he had vitiligo, of course.
But that's only because he got burnt up.
Vitiligo. He had vitiligo. His, that's where the melanin, you lose the melanin in your skin, so you turn white. That's very common with the Grovon. I don't know, do you guys have the same problem, vitiligo, where they'll have tail patches on their legs. And, no, you know what I'm talking about. Go to the Fort Belknap Reservoir. It's all over the Fort Belknap, especially the Gros-Ventre. The Nakota, not so much, but yeah, the Gros-Ventre, they just have vitiligo all over the place. As you can see, he had his nose fixed, obviously. He had his nose fixed. His lips became smaller. They say he had the Peter Pan syndrome, where he wanted to look like Peter Pan, so his nose just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller, until it almost looks like a cartoon character in this one. He's had it shaved down so much. But he was a cute kid.
What kind of effects did he have? Because I've never seen any kind of effects that he had after that commercial when he got burnt up.
The Pepsi commercial, where his hair started caught
I
on
know
fire.
his hair caught on
Right.
fire, but like, was his skin ever messed up from
No,
that?
it just burned the back of his head.
Oh.
It was, he had Jerry curl on. And
Yeah.
Jerry curl is highly
So
inflammable. It's highly inflammable. Yeah, this is when he burned his head, right here. And of course, he straightened his hair for no reason whatsoever. It's kind of interesting. His kids, they don't seem to have any African American features at all. I know, it's really kind of weird. I don't know. Prince and, was it? I don't remember their names.
forget.
Paris.
Paris,
Yeah.
that's the one, Paris. Yeah, thank you. See, you know all the fun people.
Yes, I do.
The power of social attractions. People seek a supportive soulmate in whom we can confide. This makes us feel prized and accepted if we can tell them our secrets and they keep our secrets. When we fall in love, we feel irrepressible joy, of course. If you've ever fallen in love, it feels really damn good. To the extent that you don't need to sleep and you're not hungry anymore. I know, it's kind of interesting. For those who are no longer connected through being jilted or widowed, the loss of social bonds causes pain, loneliness, or withdrawal. And of course, that's what I'm going through right now, because I just came back from break and now I miss my wife. I'm lonely. I was okay for a while, but now that I've separated from her, and I know I'll be separated until the middle of May, I feel lonely. I wasn't able to do anything last weekend. I thought, am I depressed? I kept asking myself, am I depressed? What can I do? This is terrible. I called her up on the telephone. If you've ever talked to my wife on the telephone, it's like talking to the colonel. Ma'am, yes ma'am. Yeah, she's about as romantic on the telephone as, well, as a first sergeant, so it's fairly painful. Anyway, I just wanted to hear her voice. A similar response occurs to people who live in a strange place away from people that they're not used to, and of course that's here. The difference between the Montana and here, it's just like night and day. And of course, Andre and I talk about this all the time. The people up there are different than they are down here. So this is really alien. It's very, very alien. Not only that, but the climate is totally alien. Certainly to Montana. My God, poor Montana got blasted this winter. They got buried in snow. And they got buried in October and it didn't get
And
any
it
better.
snowed this past week.
Oh, did it snow this past week?
Yeah, I seen everybody trying to do their Easter egg hunts
In the snow.
big old snow banks. Yeah, it's just cute.
That's kind of funny. So, yeah, it's tough living down here. You know, living in a Hogan house, which is okay. It's a nice house. I love it. Especially the fireplace. That's my favorite part. If it wasn't for the fireplace, I don't know if I'd be able to survive here. I love the smell of burning wood.
Right?
I know, it's the best part.
Whenever like the wind blows, you can smell the smoke. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so relaxing.
It's wonderful. But then again, I always have a fire going in my house.
You're like a chain. Like during the summer, Grandma's got a fire going. Like,
Oh, is that
if
right?
it's like hot outside, yeah.
Hot in the house as well. Well, I'll be up in Iowa in the summertime, mowing the lawn. You have to mow the lawn every week. Otherwise, the grass grows this tall. So I'll be mowing the lawn. Takes a whole day to mow my lawn.
Wow.
I've got 5 acres of lawn.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't even know how to get grass started here, so I'm like, I envy you.
I miss green so much. Factors that initiate friendships and sustain them, one of them is proximity. Proximity is geographical nearness. In order for two people to be friends, they have to be near enough to each other to have interactions on a fairly regular basis. Sociologists have discovered that most people marry someone who lives in the same neighborhood, works at the same company, or sits in the same class. As far as my marriages are concerned, I married my squadron commander. My second wife left, and we were working on a divorce, but as soon as she took another assignment to another base, it was all over with, because she wasn't close enough for me to even care about. And that's just the way it worked. After a couple months, it was all over with. And then, of course, my current wife was my squadron commander, so I saw her all the time. But it wasn't the fact, we weren't actually working together. I was a medic and she was working in headquarters. But she came to all of my softball games. I keep telling you guys she picked me off the softball field. I went the cute one that plays third base. She thinks I'm cute. But that's really what happened. I mean, I was the star of the team, and she picked me right off the field.
Just like talent.
Yeah. I was the cute third baseman. Interaction, how often do people's paths cross? Availability, having a nodding acquaintance with someone makes it more likely that that nodding acquaintance will turn into friendship or into an intimate relationship. If she had stayed in her office, I would have seen her every once in a great while. But since she came to all the softball games, and of course after the softball game, we would sit around and drink. I drank pop, of course, because I'm not a beer drinker, but she would drink beer. So that there was that interaction, that whole camaraderie of being part of the team, and of course it was the interaction that pulled us together. Ruth?
Isn't that how cheating starts too?
I'm sorry?
Isn't that how cheating starts too? You consistently.
Potentially,
be
yeah.
there.
I guess, yeah, it could certainly. I mean, if the interaction is there and the proximity is there. Yes, ma'am.
What does it mean? Okay, like I had this enemy.
Okay.
You know, and I met her when I was really young and everything. Oh, I just couldn't stand her or anything. And now we're best friends, and my kids call her Auntie. I mean, like.
Why? Why did it happen?
15 years later, I meet up with her, and maybe it's because she's down here.
Ah, she's Blackfeet and she's down here.
No, she's Grovon. She's Assiniboine, Grovon, Nakota Blackfeet. And me and her, we just couldn't get along.
Yeah, up there, because you're around all those other Grovon, Nakota, Blackfeet people. But
Yeah.
down here, it's like all these strange Navajos are around here. I know, she's like the only person you could talk to. It's like the two of us talking about snow.
And her name is Andrea too, you know, and she's living with my daughter right now, you know.
Right.
She's a RN, she's a registered nurse
Sure.
and everything, and she's looking to buy a house. But anyway, she's like so close to my kids and my
Right.
family, and
Right.
sometimes I don't know how. And me and her were like, we used to skate each other. Look at us, you know.
Sure. But down here, you're sisters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Same thing happens in the military. So you have all these enemies that live around you, and then you go off to the military. You run into somebody else from Muncie, or you run into somebody else, in your case, from the Blackfeet Reservation, and it's like old home week. All of a sudden, you can use the same words. You can talk about the same things. You know the same people. So there's that much more of a connection between you and somebody who doesn't know Montana. Has never seen the snow. You guys have never seen snow.
It's so funny that happened to me when I was working in Kansas. There's this girl I didn't get along with. I didn't hang out with her in high school. She was like a sports person, and then we ended up in the same workplace. And she was like, "Hi," and she gave me a hug, and I was like, "The hell are you hugging me?" And then we just started talking about high school, and we got to actually know one another, like get to personal level. Like
Yeah.
she's not just a jock anymore. So I guess there's like a deeper level, I guess you could say, of understanding. I think that's what happened because I got like closer to my sisters than I do down here when we were in Alaska. Like me and my sisters really bonded because we're the only ones that we have from down here. And people like you try to find the other people who are from your reservation. I think that's yeah.
Somebody from back home.
Yeah.
Your Hoosiers are always, well, I'm talking about Hoosiers. Hoosiers are always a lot friendlier than everybody else. I'm sorry, somebody from Indiana.
Oh.
And
It's
so
just-
this is how cheating happens too.
Cheating can start this way, sure. Yeah, it's possible that may happen. The fact that they're, but at the same time, how can I explain this? There's a thing called work wife or work spouse. And that's somebody that you are especially close to. There's not, it isn't something romantic, but it's the fact that both of you cover each other. Both of you, yeah, and you always sit with each other. Instead of one of you being alone, you're always together.
I heard that in Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah, and it's, yeah, and actually it's very, very real. But of course, a lot of times, this person is very important to you, and you wouldn't ruin it with intimacy, with sexuality. That just doesn't make any sense. So usually your work spouse. Well, if you watch Big Bang, you know Raj and Howard are that they are work spouses.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My
because
husband has a work life, and I tell him, you know, I explained that to him, you know, Benita is your work wife, and he was looking at me. He kind of got a little offended.
Right.
And I was like, no, this is.
it's not like you were accusing him of having an affair.
You know, and he was like, oh, okay, yeah, she is.
Yeah, she is his special friend at work, and
Yeah.
they help each other and they take care of each other. And just like when you're at home, you take care of him, or the two of you take care of each other. Roommates are more likely to become friends than enemies. Interactions enable people to explore similarities and to perceive themselves as a social unit, and that's interactions. Anticipation of interaction, merely anticipating interaction boosts liking. This is fairly adaptive, anticipating liking, expecting that someone will be pleasant and compatible increases the chance of forming a rewarding relationship. Since we can't always pick the people around us, this adaptation allows us to get along with whoever we are around. My assumption is when I come into a classroom, first day of class, I assume that all my students are going to love me as much as I love them. That's my assumption. That's always my assumption. And that's why it's easier for me to feel affection for my students, no matter who they are, no matter how much trouble they give me. Because I'm always assuming that they're going to, I anticipate that we will not only interact, but we will like each other. That is my assumption. And some people don't, but I do. Factors that initiate friendships and sustain them. Familiarity leads to fondness, of course. So the more you're around somebody, the more familiar they are, the more you like them. So all you have to do is interact with them in a positive manner, and that will breed fondness, as long as you interact in a positive manner. Research shows that people like familiar things far more than novel things, and that's one of the reasons why I played you the two operas, to see if which one you like the best. I played you one of them before, and so I introduced it to you, and the second time I played it you didn't like it because you liked the other song better. Why? Probably because you'd heard that other song more frequently than the first song that I played for you. Familiarity only leads to boredom when the stimulation is incessant. In other words, over and over and over and over again. You do get tired of people after a while. People tend to like familiar people. Hence, if you are a Blackfeet, then you like people who are Blackfeet or Gros Ventre or Nakota because they act like people from Montana. We even like our own mirror image more than we like our actual image. And that's why people keep taking so many selfies. Oh my God. Oh, I hate that one, so they get rid of it. Oh, I don't like that one. And they take a lot of pictures in mirrors. Okay, which is the more attractive, the lady on the left or the lady on the right? Lady on the left, lady on the right.
Neither. Neither.
Which is more attractive? Left or right?
Left.
What?
Right.
Right? Right?
Right.
Right?
I say left.
Left? Left or right?
Both?
No. Which is more attractive, left or right?
Well, if you go with makeup, it'll be the one on the right.
Right? So we've got 4 rights and 1 left. Okay, got another one. Left or right?
Left.
Left? Left?
Left.
Left?
Left.
Left?
Left.
Left. Oh, everybody likes the left guy. Okay. Good looks are an asset. You may not be able to judge a book by its cover. Beauty may only be skin deep, but study after study refutes Cicero's advice to refute appearance. In other words, don't even think about appearance. What we're looking for is personality. Appearance does matter. It always matters. We can pretend it doesn't, but it does. Even people that aren't supposed to care about appearance, like teachers. They're not supposed to treat the pretty kids in the front row better than the ugly kids in the back row. No offense, Edison.
He had to do
I
it.
would wait all week to say that. A young woman's physical attractiveness is a moderately good predictor of how frequently she will date. At first meeting, attractiveness seems to be the most important factor in the desire to date someone for both males and females. So it ain't just guys that are blinded by beauty. Women are blinded by beauty as well. Are women less superficial than men? And this is a question. Women seem to be able to overlook what somebody looks like. Is this true?
No.
Hell no. It's not even close. All the research say that women are just as attracted to attractiveness as men are. That's
My
one.
husband, because he was the only Navajo at SKC, and we seen him walking, he has these big old black eyes, big old eyelashes and all this, and we're like, oh my God, where's
He's so
this
pretty.
guy come from? Wow, so me and all my friends, and I'm not kidding, me and all my friends made a bet to see who could get him. So,
Damn.
we did. And my friend was a librarian, at the time, and she goes, oh, he's from this place called Sowell, Arizona. I don't know how to pronounce that. We're looking him up on the
Right.
that he just returned
Right.
and everything. Then I was like, oh, cool. And then we found out he lived right behind me, but my mom lived right across from him.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, and then my best friend was his roommate, or one of my friends. So yeah, I won.
You won. What did you get?
2 kids and Saley Lake.
Ooh, Saley Lake. Which, if we're talking about lakes, Flathead Lake is an amazing. I know.
Beautiful. 100 times bigger than that one.
Oh, no kidding. At least 100 times.
Yeah.
It's huge.
I want to see it.
It's
I heard
nuts.
it's so clean.
It's clean.
I want to see it.
Yeah. It's gorgeous. And cold, oh my God. It's being fed by a glacier. So yeah, it's
Well,
cold
it
as hell.
comes from Glacier National Park,
Right.
St. Mary's Lake, and then it goes under, and then it comes up to Flathead Lake. And what happens is, they have sturgeons in there, and they call it the Loch Ness Monster.
Oh.
And their eyes are like as big as our body. Yeah,
They're huge.
but you don't see them or anything, you just don't see them. But
Well, they come up every once in a while.
yeah, they do. And the summertime's the best time to go there. In July, you can rent those motor skis. It's crazy.
And the reason it looks so clean is because it's got minerals in it.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's cheating. It's not really as blue as it looks. It's not really that clean. It's not. It's
It
not.
is. It's coming from Glacier, the headwaters.
Okay, so women obviously are just as
It's true.
taken. Yeah, I know that.
I mean, my dad is beautiful. Like, he had natural straight teeth. He was like very fit and with beautiful cheekbones. And my mom got him, had 6 girls, and I'm like, I'm not doing anything less than my dad.
And so
my
you didn't.
husband's beautiful.
So you didn't. You picked a beautiful husband.
Yes.
We have to stop right now because it's time to quit. But next time we'll talk more about this fun stuff, and I'll have more beauty contests with different select individuals.
Talk about married with
As much fun.
husbands.